certainly were concerned about the cuts that occurred to housing programs in the mid-90s. So it was no surprise to many, including us, that by the late 90s, 1999 specifically, there was a need for the federal government to address the growing homelessness situation across the country, most notably in Toronto, but growing and continues to grow as an issue in Winnipeg.
In 1993, Canada, CMHC, decided that they would no longer provide any new subsidies for any new social housing programs, or units, I should say. And so effectively there was a cap on new social housing programming. And in 1996, the federal government unilaterally decided, or I should say bilaterally, working with the provinces, to download the social housing programs to the provinces, including the Aboriginal housing programs which had been put in place in the mid-70s. We were advocating that we be exempted because of the fact that we signed treaties nation to nation, and the federal government has a fiduciary responsibility to work with the Aboriginal people. So instead of maintaining that perspective and that relationship, Canada abrogated its responsibility in that context and downloaded us to the provinces.
Groups like KINU, who have operating agreements with Manitoba Housing, are headed towards a crisis in housing. We are beginning to come to the end of those housing agreements, those operating agreements, and when those operating agreements come to an end, the subsidies come to an end. And these are subsidies that the tenant gets in order to help them make their homes affordable. So when we get to that point, things have to change. We have to operate a little different. We have no choice other than to raise rents to at least an economic rent to be able to sustain ourselves. Some families will have to move no matter what.
I think what I love about my community is, just the personal strength of, people that just want to help the community get out of the funk that it's in right now. It's not a question of whatever. It's just there's a hope. There's a hope that's being created out there. Communities are being created, and as kind of like as dysfunctional and as divided as we are, people are still working towards a vision of self-determination. It's not perfect, far from perfect, but at least we're working towards it. And I think, for government to understand that, it's going to require the combined efforts of all three levels to support that, to facilitate that vision.
What I see is that there needs to be good, accessible housing for Aboriginal people with disabilities.
One of the things I would like to see would be community housing for the students, where the supports are built in. Students who are Aboriginal and single students can live in a regular residence. But those who have family members, we need to have family housing available for them.
I think we need to take a look at critical housing issues. I think our path towards community economic development, both in cities and in rural communities, is starting to get its sea legs, and that's good to see, but it needs to develop and continue. Of course, education is pivotal for all of this. Without education, our kids are limited to live in poverty.
Within housing, the solutions could be simple. It's taking a look at the ideology and the misconceptions, the biases, the prejudices, the discrimination, the racism behind the policies and procedures of who gets housing and who doesn't get housing, and why it's not a priority for government to have housing as a standard for living.
Most important elements, and that's you. Not me, but you. You know, people around you. That's what makes society such a beautiful thing, is when people care for each other. You know, it's in the Christian Bible, you know, love thy neighbor as yourself.
Well, we've got to stop marginalizing people. We've got to include people in the wealth of this country. There's alternative systems that are required. There's alternative systems that produce success. And there's alternative systems that are much more cost effective.
From here, I am working on getting myself a place. I've got myself a job now. Yes, I am looking for a place to live.
How's that going?
It's all about patience. Really got to have patience, especially when you're homeless.
Who has the answer to decent housing in the city of Winnipeg? I don't know. Are we willing to think out of the box and try something different? You know, I don't know.
What's going to happen in the next generation? Is it going to be better, or is it going to get worse, or is it going to get better?
What I believe is needed is an Aboriginal housing program for Canada and Manitoba. Aboriginal housing relies mainly on federal and provincial governments providing funding to the housing corporations. What MUNA is looking at doing is transferring the administration from the province of Manitoba to Manitoba Urban Native Housing Association. The transfer of the housing administration will be a self-determination looking at self-governance of Aboriginal peoples.
If they would change the approach, give us the money instead of handing it to the provinces in turn use it whichever way they want, because there's no real stipulation in how they use the money. But if they would give us flexibility to take the money and use it accountably and invest it and make savings and reinvest that into our programs, then we would make headway against in meeting the need of our people.
In Winnipeg and in Manitoba, the Aboriginal community is growing at one of the highest proportions. In Winnipeg, there's close to 70,000 Aboriginal peoples. In the next 10 to 20 years, there'll be well over 100,000 Aboriginal people in the city of Winnipeg. Today, with the waiting list well over 4,000, coming close to 5,000, the need for social housing, rent-geared-to-income housing is in a crisis. And if the government does not try to address any of these concerns, they will be paying a larger bill in the future.
Our people have always said we need to look 7 generations back, but also look 7 generations into the future, because we need to provide for the generations yet to come.
Our battles is not of flesh and blood, but of spirit. So may your spirit be strong. So this is how we strengthen our spirit.
That's great. How long have you been painting for?
I don't know. I've been off and on whenever I have a good home.
Yeah.